I was born in a little town called Dehradun in India, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas. Cold, bitterly cold. We arrived in Edmonton on February the 26th. When you hear about snow, you hear about, so you have this kind of romantic notion, and you just can't wear enough sweaters, right, to overcome, minus 40 something. We were really focused. I mean, like the story of so many immigrant families, like, my dad sat us down and said, we have goals, okay? In the first year, we have a goal to save $7,000, and we're going to buy this swampland out in, Millwoods, Edmonton, and that's going to be our home, and that's going to be, how we're going to establish ourselves in the entry into middle-class Canada. And so, it really, the kind of the growing up years, were really about, establishing ourselves financially, just making sure that the family was going to be okay. And so it wasn't a lot of, now, having said that, it was still a wonderful childhood. I got a chance to, play sports. I got a chance to work really hard. And I got a chance to kind of connect with society. So there's so many stories about, overcoming that kind of natural fear of public speaking and interacting with people. When I was 14, just out of the blue, a producer that was starting a show in Edmonton just randomly came up and said, would you like to be involved in this? And literally a week later, I was hosting a show on TV live. Now, it wasn't prime time. It was, it was a community channel. It was but boy, taking some risks and overcoming what I knew back then were going to be inhibitors to getting over things like, public speaking and shyness and so on. So I've had this kind of habit of jumping into the deep end without anything. I grew up, on the one hand, wanting to preserve the richness of my heritage. And so I had the fortune of some amazing friends who were also, immigrants and came to Canada and spoke the language. In fact, I spoke Hindi and English when I came here, and I learned Punjabi from my friends, after I came to Canada. But, we played hockey together, hung out together. And then there was this strong desire to fit in and be part of Canadian society. So I had a friend of like a whole group of Canadian friends. And I was really proud of the fact that I could kind of be part of both and the intersection. I always thought this was my secret sauce, right? That I could benefit from two cultures, and the fact that I could speak another language, and I could, take the best of both and make that my advantage. And when I talk about diversity and inclusion, which has been a passion from day one, I kind of go back to those early days and go, this is an advantage for Canada. If everybody brought those perspectives, what a richer country, right, we are and would be. So my first degree I got from the University of Alberta. I think in Alberta there's a rule or which says if you grew up in Alberta, you have to do something in the oil and gas sector. So my first degree was, just tongue-in-cheek, of course. My first degree was in petroleum geology. So I bucked the trend of the typical Indian, parent that said you should go, to med school, or you should be a lawyer or engineer. Well, I guess geologists, engineers are part of the same kind of group. But that's what I did. My first degree was in petroleum geology. So, after I worked in the oil and gas sector for a while after graduating, in the mid 80s, the oil and gas sector was in deep trouble. The international price of oil had tanked. And I'd done some work in the sector itself. And so I went back and actually did computing science and management. And then a few years later, here at the University of Ottawa, I did my graduate certificate in public sector management and governance. So I'd been working as I said, I worked in the private sector for a bit. After getting into the computing scene, I worked for EdTel, Edmonton Telephones, for a little while, and then the City of Ottawa's Computing Resources. And that's what got me into Statistics Canada. And I worked, having started at Statistics Canada in 1988, I worked in the regional office. I worked on a number of, the first mainframes and computer-assisted interviewing. And I always had this kind of outlook of how can I use technology and innovation to make things better for the organization, but also add greater value for Canadians. And it's really that kind of spirit that got the attention of the Chief Statistician here at the time. He'd come to visit us in Edmonton, and I think I did a presentation that he remembered. And so in 1996, after I was looking after the census in the region, he invited me to apply on a competition. It was I think at that time, there was a differential between SIs and ESs before the EC category had come in. And so I'd applied to, I think, an EC5 or a 6 equivalent competition. And I won that competition, and that brought me to Ottawa. I've been so fortunate, I have to say, that I've had incredible bosses and leaders. And they weren't incredible because they were easy on me, okay? They were incredible because, one, they believed in me more than I believed in myself. And so it establishes this kind of, I will not let my boss down kind of, and then, juxtaposed with that immigrant psyche that I talked about, that fear, I think the combination of the person that came in the morning to turn the lights on and the one that at the end turned them off. So in other words, good work ethic. But a leader that believes in you and supports you and gives you so much latitude and room that you wouldn't even give yourself is really, I think, the biggest gift that I've had. It's something that is completely always evolving as a concept. I mean, there will never be enough books written about, leadership, and there will never be enough people trying to define it. So, I'll kind of give you a lens of how I view leadership. And so, to me, leadership is all about the ability to take people towards a vision with a purpose. And in the process, they grow beyond their wildest expectations. To me, that's the ultimate kind of definition of leadership. As I mentioned, I started my career in 1988 with this organization in a regional office, and then I came to Ottawa in 97, and worked my way up to the assistant chief statistician before going off and doing a couple of policy jobs and regulatory jobs. So, watching two successive chief statisticians resign, in their own kind of context of principle and autonomy, was really hard. It was hard to see, even from a distance, because remember, I spent 21 years before I left working on some of the most highest profile innovative projects in this organization, which in some part I think led to an international recognition of this organization being not just among the world's best, but the world's best. So when you see two successive leaders resign publicly, it does something to the psyche and the morale of the organization, and people note the change internally as well as externally. And so to come in, remember, you don't get a transition period when that happens. They usually resign in a moment, and the next moment you're in. So to get your head wrapped around what this organization was about, that deep history and richness, and then to replace that with your vision to repair, in a sense, that real hurt that an organization goes through, and then reestablish that reputation and rapport with Canadians as well as internationally. It's a daunting task. It was difficult. It was difficult to come in. Easy in the sense that I knew the organization, I knew a lot of the people, but difficult in the sense of you kind of have to reestablish a lot of the fundamentals of the organization. As I said before, leadership is all about people, and people do get hurt. And how do you go about taking people who are hurt and inspire them to now move forward is tricky business. One was to deliver on the 2016 census, which was on the heels of the 2011 census and the whole mandatory long form issue that I think most Canadians are aware of. So to deliver a successful 2016 census. The second one was to bring in legislation to make this agency more independent and yet still relevant, and even more relevant. And then the third one was to modernize the agency. There was a reporter that I quote the odd time who said it best, and he said, I'll leave his name anonymous, but he said, when Statistics Canada says it, you can almost the debate ends there, and it's now you take that as a given. So to me, I think that's why we exist, is absolutely, we should have vigorous debate. We should have, shouting matches about, where this country needs to go. But we shouldn't be arguing about the facts, and we shouldn't be arguing about where things are. And that part comes from this agency. Now we're talking about statistics, official statistics, and where we sit. And so this organization, which is rooted in the Constitution as the organization that is there to tell us all, Canadians, all of us, about what's going on the social, economic, and the environmental fronts, to settle that debate about the what, is why we exist. I remember that day. We in fact met in our main building in our conference center, where we brought in the senior management cadre, our director generals, a few directors, all the assistant chief statisticians, and myself. And we had we had masks, we had all the sanitizers, and we took all the distancing parameters that were available to us at the time. And it was a pivotal moment. We just said, in whatever way we can be helpful, we will take a leadership role. And I remember, having the conversation with the team and said, when there's fog, when nobody knows what's going on, and you're in that car driving, do you look at your instrumentation less or more? I think you look at it more. You want to know how much gas you have. You want to know how fast you're going. You want to check the blind spots. You want to make sure your windshield is absolutely crystal clear. That's what we do. And we made the decision at that point that we're actually going to do more. We're going to provide more data, richer data, more timely data, more meaning. And we went out. And you know what? Every single organization that we talked to said we need more of your expertise and we want to partner with you. So data have proven to be invaluable in how it is that we managed our way through. And it was not about us using the data, it's about how do we provide it to Canadians and policymakers and businesses so that they could do a better job of overcoming the challenges of this pandemic era. First of all, I understand that sentiment, that public servants in larger numbers now feel that it's tougher, that they're not listened to, or that value or the connection to the mission is not as strong as it was or it could be. We can't ignore the fact that we came through a very extraordinary period in the pandemic. But I would say some of those feelings were there even before the pandemic, and the pandemic just exacerbated a lot of those sentiments that are there. And I'm fortunate enough to have a really rich network of private sector CEOs that I get a chance to meet with on a very frequent basis as well. And I have to say that that's not just unique to the public service. Now, we could talk about the degree and the intensity, but it's a general problem, a challenge for leaders to contend with. As I mentioned, my simple definition of leadership. If you've got a really enthusiastic and willing, off they go, you don't have to apply that much grease, if you like. But when there is real pain, when there is real, a sense of disconnection, it becomes very difficult. It becomes difficult for employees who don't see their voice being heard. They don't see their concerns being addressed. They don't see leaders in the bureaucracy removing obstacles. They see the exact opposite. So I think we have to rethink the language, command and control, chain of command. We have to rethink hierarchies. We have to rethink this kind of power differential. Today's leadership is how do you lead with amazing listening, with empathy, the sense of being a servant to your leadership team, and really understanding the system within which they work, and to actually lead and inspire them and trust them. And that is not sort of where leadership was, 30, 40 years ago, or even 20 years ago, where it was about, I know as a leader what's best. And so, I'm just going to build in systems in place for you to just carry that. I think, the tension for change is now at such where people have said, no, that I'm not just going to blindly, take that. And I think it's going to take a leap of faith as well for us to be able to reestablish that connection, that trust. Now, I think some organizations, including this one, are taking that very, very seriously and rebuilding that culture. Now, we have to also, there's some challenges here, right? There's a whole hybrid kind of workspace, and there's some exceptions to that. And so we have to work around some of these things and maybe even step back a bit and say, look, are they conducive to that kind of outcome that we want? And remember, we have to reconnect. I'd say the last thing is that we have to reconnect with why we exist. We're not here to serve ourselves. We're here to serve the public. That's what a public servant is all about, regardless of what level you are. The higher you are, the more of a service delivery agent you are. So I think we have to go back to fundamental principles of why we exist. We have to rethink that relationship and the power structure. And I think we have to go towards a new way of operating, which is a much higher degree of trust and systems and hierarchy that are actually there to propagate it, not the opposite. We have to become servants and remove obstacles through hierarchies that have been built at every level instead of thickening and frustrating people. So a lot of work to be done, but I think the payoff is incredible. I think we're on that right road. Yeah, interestingly enough, when I think I mentioned earlier, when I became the Chief Statistician here in 2016, one of the 3 objectives was to modernize this agency. And modernizing the agency meant that we were going to explore new ways and innovate how it is that we create official statistics. And so 2 examples. One is crowdsourcing. So crowdsourcing is essentially putting a platform up and allowing the population to self-select whether they want to be part and give their data or not. It's not a representative sample, but yet it's an important tool. And then we figured out, okay, how can we, after we have the information, fit it into a more robust survey frame? I remember the first time we did the crowdsourcing, we were wondering, is anybody ever going to respond? Well, in a week, we had tens of thousands. Within 3 weeks, we had 500,000 people who had responded. So we knew we were on to something. So that's one. Pre-pandemic, we'd also done wastewater sampling. So we were on the cannabis before it was decriminalized. We wanted to get a sense of, what is the illicit market? And so we were actually looking at sampling wastewater to get a sense of what was the underlying consumption, because there's no way to get at that market in an easy way and in a safe way. Once things were regulated and they were put in, we could get those volumes, but the difference between when you have to go and the legal market, it tells you what is the predominance of the illegal market. And we've been tracking that. And now, all of a sudden, that same tool is available for opioids and so many other. So we were one of the pioneers. We worked in collaboration with many other partners. But this is what this agency does and has done for so many decades, is this innovative spirit that can do, and we need to solve a problem, and how can we come at it in ways that are non-traditional. One is connect to the rich heritage, reputation, the cachet or swagger, if you want, that this organization has built over 100 plus years. I have been fortunate to have been associated with this organization, most of it internally, but some externally as well as a consumer, for more than 35 years. So, a third of that kind of history. And it's been an amazing ride. What we have built as a world-leading organization, where people look to this organization when the statistical community in the world, is confronting, okay, well, how do we integrate environment into our economics and our social fabrics? What does social inclusion and cohesion look like? And I could go on and on and on. They come to this organization and want this organization to be leading in developing those concepts, those frameworks, and then the data that underlie it, and to make sure it connects with real needs. It's not just providing data and walking away. It's actually building capacity. It's providing a data service to Canadians. Know that it is an institution that is beyond just the federal government. Mayors of cities depend upon the outputs of this institution just as much as a cabinet minister. Businesses and chambers rely on it. Academics rely on it. Not-for-profits rely on it. So know the gravity of what we do and why it matters, and work tirelessly towards that objective. The second thing I would say is complacency should never set in. You start believing the clippings, as they say, you start, and that is a surefire sign of moving irrelevance irrelevance. This institution has established that place in society because it took risks, intelligent risks. It took the depth of expertise and innovation, that curiosity, to actually move things forward. And so I would say, even if we're getting into a period of austerity, that innovation is absolutely critical. In fact, it is integral to solving some of the problems of how do we get more with less. And so innovation shouldn't be a casualty. It should be an enabling feature. And clearly, innovation is about people and ideas. And so I would say innovation is something that has got us here, and it's going to be key to moving forward. And the last thing I would say is never forget that we exist because Canadians trust us. So know that that trust is hard-earned and easily lost. And so the transparency within which we operate. When we make a mistake, we should be the first ones to stand up, and we made a mistake and we fix it and we are upfront about it. And so that culture that is driven through strong values and ethics, that transparency within which we work, and the trust that Canadians and businesses have in us, without it, it doesn't exist. And so never take it for granted, and work hard towards strengthening it in this muddled, complicated, and ever-expanding data ecosystem each and every day. I think, like so many of us, we didn't start as leaders in the positions that we're in, or leaving the public service in these positions. We all started, I started right at the bottom. And so we relied on the advice of leaders and so many. And the generosity with which my bosses, leaders, mentors, informal, was just tremendous. And so there are a few messages that I kind of share with people who are willing to listen. One is be curious, because curiosity opens up so many doors. And you see a very different product, very different advice from somebody who took that curiosity and embedded it in the product itself. It's more pragmatic, it provides far greater context, and it's, I think, more usable, because now you, the reader, or the person who's receiving that, also get what was in the mind of the person that was creating it, rather than just some analysis was done and there were the things. So to me, the number one thing is hone your curiosity as part of the hard skills that you're getting along with it. Two is work ethic. There is something to be said for actually having delivered, done, actually made a difference. So I think we do undervalue that aspect. And so I give the advice, could somebody stand up for you and say, this person did this, and that was not something that was there prior to that person? So do you have that sense of accountability where you take pride? Yes, you could be part of a team, but what did you deliver? What was your narrative? And will others be able to speak for your narrative as somebody who actually delivered something of value? So that's the second piece of advice. So don't just be a talker. Don't just be part of, the furniture or whatever it is. establish that and actually deliver something concrete that you can be proud of and others will actually recognize. And I would say, the public service is such an amazing institution with so many people and so much expertise. And so the third piece I give them is grow your network. Because in a knowledge-based society and public service, knowing who to talk to get the answer is at times even more critical than knowing the answer or taking an inordinate amount of time to get at the answer. So curiosity, owning, and networking. Those three things to me are really, really critical. First, I would say that as an immigrant that came to this country when I was 11, it's a quid pro quo relationship. We need to give back more to this country than we take. Because if we take more than we give, we weaken the system and we weaken the country and we weaken it for future generations. And so that deep connection to wanting to improve the systems, the future of this country, whether it's healthcare, you name the policy, the environment, whether it's equality, you have to give, not just take. And in fact, the more you give, the more it's able to give back. And so I would say it is a privilege. It's not a right to be Canadian. And that establishes this pact that we will give this country our best. And we'll give it the best always. We'll always be honest. We'll always be transparent. We may make mistakes. That's okay. We will fail at certain things, and that's okay. We will learn. We'll dust up. We'll get up. But we will always be in the service of Canada and Canadians.